There's a question that keeps showing up in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Washington. Japan has bullet trains. Japan has advanced robotics. Japan has TSMC already building fabs in Kumamoto. Japan has been America's closest Pacific ally for 80 years. So why is America moving semiconductor supply chain infrastructure to the Philippines instead? Not theoretically, actually moving it. The U.S. Commerce Secretary flew to Manila and told business leaders, on the record, "We are all in on the Philippines." U.S. companies announced over $1 billion in investments on that single trip. There's a formal partnership under the CHIPS Act signed specifically with the Philippines, and a first-ever trilateral summit at the White House with Japan, America, and the Philippines together, launched a $100 billion investment corridor through the Philippine island of Luzon. Nobody's cleanly answered why the Philippines and not Japan. In the next 14 minutes, we're going to answer it. 8 specific reasons, every single one verified. By the time we get to reason number 1, the reason that ties everything together, you'll understand why this decision wasn't even close. First, understand what America is actually trying to do. The CHIPS Act of 2022 put $52.7 billion on the table to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to U.S. soil and away from a supply chain dangerously concentrated in Taiwan and East Asia. But there's a second layer most people missed. The CHIPS Act also created the International Technology Security and Innovation Fund, the ITSI Fund, giving the U.S. State Department $500 million over 5 years specifically to build allied semiconductor capacity abroad. In November 2023, Vice President Kamala Harris personally announced the first formal CHIPS Act (1TSI) partnership with the Philippines. The White House stated it would help create a more resilient, secure, and sustainable global semiconductor value chain. 4 months later, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo flew to Manila leading the first-ever U.S. presidential trade and investment mission to the Philippines. 22 American company executives in tow. Standing in front of Philippine business leaders, she said the Philippines was at the top of the list of countries for companies looking to diversify their chip supply chains, and she committed to help double the Philippines' semiconductor assembly facilities. She didn't fly to Tokyo to say that. She flew to Manila. Why? 8 reasons. Number 8. Japan is running out of workers. The Philippines is swimming in them. Here's a number that should stop you cold. According to the OECD's Employment Outlook 2025, Japan's working-age population peaked at 87.3 million in 1995. By 2024, it had fallen to 73.7 million, a 16% decline. The OECD projects it will fall another 31% by 2060. Japan's old age dependency ratio has already more than doubled since 1995. As of 2024, 36.25 million Japanese, 29.3% of the entire population, are aged 65 or older, the highest proportion of any country or region on Earth, with a population above 100,000. Think about what that means for an industry that runs 24/7 and needs millions of precision workers for the next 30 years. Japan can't fully staff the fabs it already has. TSMC's Kumamoto facility required relocating Taiwanese engineers just to get operations running. Now look at the Philippines. According to the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office, the Philippines had a median age of just 24.5 years as of 2021, the second youngest in all of Southeast Asia. The UN Population Prospects 2024 data shows the country's working-age population won't peak until 2051, and the population overall won't peak until 2092. AMRO explicitly described the Philippines as safe from a looming demographic winter, while Japan is in its deepest chill. When you need to build an industry that requires millions of precision manufacturing workers for the next 3 decades, you go where the workers are. And right now, the workers are in the Philippines. But a young workforce means nothing if the lights cost too much to keep on. And what I found about Japan's energy bills, compared to everyone else, genuinely floored me. Number 7. Japan's electricity costs are quietly killing its cost competitiveness. Semiconductor manufacturing is one of the most energy-intensive industries on Earth. Fabs run around the clock, drawing enormous power for photolithography, deposition, etching, and climate control. According to the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office's 2024 Annual Consultation Report on Japan, a document the AMRO published specifically analyzing Japan's semiconductor revival, Japan's electricity costs are double those in South Korea and the United States. Double. AMRO's own words. TSMC's Kumamoto facility is already confronting energy and water supply constraints, with local infrastructure under pressure from the demand of a single fab. Japan's Rapidus 2 nanometer project is being built in Hokkaido specifically because of geothermal energy potential, but even that comes with enormous infrastructure build-out costs that push the total program price higher. And separately, a Digitimes report found that electricity costs for wafer foundries in Europe and Japan run roughly double those in Taiwan, the US, and South Korea. When you combine higher energy costs with Japan's significantly higher labor costs, the cost math for building the next 50 assembly and packaging facilities, not the bleeding-edge fabs, the volume production layer, gets difficult to justify in Japan when alternatives exist. The Philippines is no energy utopia either, but reforms are closing the gap. The Create More Act of 2024 expanded fiscal incentives, including power cost deductions for manufacturers, contributing to major investment commitments from Samsung and Murata Manufacturing to expand Philippine operations. And labor costs for comparable manufacturing roles in the Philippines run 60 to 70% lower than in Japan. When cost is a constraint, and when you're trying to build dozens of new facilities fast, the Philippines has structural advantages that Japan simply doesn't. Here's where it gets strange, though, because the next reason isn't about cost at all. It's about a single meeting, one summit, one morning in April 2024, that quietly restructured the entire Pacific economy, and most people still haven't clocked what actually happened in that room. Number 6. The Luzon Economic Corridor, and the signal Japan can't replicate. On April 11, 2024, the leaders of the United States, Japan, and the Philippines held their first ever trilateral summit at the White House. President Biden, President Marcos, Prime Minister Kishida, and at that summit, they announced the Luzon Economic Corridor, described as the first partnership for global infrastructure and investment corridor in the entire Indo-Pacific. The corridor connects Subic Bay, Clark, Manila, and Batangas. Rail, ports, clean energy, semiconductor supply chains, agribusiness. The U.S. State Department stated it was expected to have an outsized impact on critical industries, including semiconductors. Here's the part most analysis gets wrong. Japan isn't competing with the Philippines. Japan is investing in the Philippines. Japan was a full founding partner at the Luzon Corridor announcement. Japan is the Philippines' largest bilateral ODA donor. Japan is selling coastal defense hardware to the Philippines and conducting joint military exercises. The trilateral partnership was upheld and expanded even after the Biden administration left. In July 2025, Secretary of State Marco Rubio committed $15 million in private sector development for the corridor. Japan and the Philippines are not rivals in America's semiconductor strategy. They are stacked on top of each other. Japan provides equipment, investment capital, and advanced materials. The Philippines provides geography, workforce, minerals, and manufacturing labor. That stacking only works because of where the Philippines sits on the map. And that's the next reason. Now, you might be thinking this is all just trade policy, infrastructure, investment flows. Fine. But reason 5 is where this stops being economics and starts being something else entirely. Because it's about what happens if a war starts in the Taiwan Strait tomorrow, and which country is physically positioned to decide who wins. Number 5. Subic Bay controls the South China Sea. Japan doesn't sit there. Let's talk geography directly. Japan sits northeast of Taiwan. Its strategic value in a conflict scenario is real. Logistics, airfields, early warning. Japan is critical to the first island chain, but the Philippines sits southeast of Taiwan. Luzon looks directly across the South China Sea, and the South China Sea is where an estimated $3 to $5 trillion in annual global trade flows. It is the maritime artery of the entire world economy. In February 2023, the U.S. and Philippines announced an expansion of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA. The original agreement, signed in 2014, gave the U.S. rotational access to 5 Philippine military installations. In April 2023, 4 more sites were added, bringing the total to 9. Of the 4 new sites, 3 are in northern Luzon, the closest Philippine territory to Taiwan. 1 is on Balabac Island in Palawan, facing directly into the South China Sea. The U.S. now has rotational access to 9 Philippine facilities, the largest American military footprint in the Philippines since Clark Air Base and Subic Bay Naval Station closed in 1991. In May 2023, the U.S. and Philippines issued new bilateral defense guidelines, explicitly stating that an armed attack on either party's armed forces or vessels anywhere in the South China Sea would invoke mutual defense obligations. This is not just a security arrangement, it's manufacturing insurance. When America builds chip infrastructure inside a country where it has 9 military base access points and a mutual defense treaty explicitly covering the South China Sea, that infrastructure carries a deterrence shield. Japan has a mutual defense treaty too. But Japan isn't sitting at the South China Sea choke point. The Philippines is. And there's something underneath the soil of those islands that makes the choke point even more valuable. Except here's the thing. Military access only protects the supply chain. It doesn't build it. And building it requires something China currently controls. Something sitting right underneath the Philippine Islands in quantities that should make Beijing very nervous. Number 4. The Philippines is sitting on over $1 trillion in the minerals that semiconductors require. Japan has almost none. Here is the material problem America's semiconductor strategy has to solve. China dominates the refining and processing of gallium, graphite, rare earths, and dozens of other materials needed for chip manufacturing and defense systems. Right now, that gives Beijing leverage over the global technology input chain. Japan has almost no domestic deposits of these minerals. Japan's own strategy, according to AMRO's 2024 Japan report, requires building partnerships with alternative suppliers that are resource-rich, because Japan is dependent on imports for essentially all critical mineral needs. Now look at what's sitting in the Philippines. According to the Philippine Mines and Geosciences Bureau, and confirmed by Chambers and Partners' 2026 Mining Guide, the Philippines is the 5th most mineralized country in the world, with an estimated $1 trillion in untapped reserves of copper, gold, nickel, zinc, and silver, and only about 5% of those reserves have been explored. The country ranks among the world's top producers of nickel, second globally after Indonesia, copper, and cobalt. The U.S. government's own Trade.gov market intelligence page describes the Philippines as holding an estimated $170 billion in nickel deposits alone, among the largest in Southeast Asia, with major copper deposits across Luzon and Mindanao. In early 2026, the U.S. and Philippines signed a critical minerals memorandum of understanding specifically designed to shift the Philippines from raw ore exporter to a domestic processor of nickel, cobalt, and other key inputs, locking it into the allied supply chain at the materials layer, not just the assembly layer. Combine mineral wealth with manufacturing capacity, and you're not just building a chip plant. You're building a vertically integrated supply chain from raw earth to finished semiconductor, all inside allied territory, all outside Chinese leverage. Japan cannot offer that. The minerals aren't in the ground, so you've got the workers, the geography, the military cover, the minerals. You'd think that's enough. But Reason 3 exposes a fault line that almost nobody talks about, And it's the reason why Japan's billion-dollar chip investments, as impressive as they are, actually don't compete with what the Philippines is offering America at all. Number 3. Japan is building competitors to the Philippines. The Philippines is building capacity for America. Let's be precise about what Japan's semiconductor investment actually is. Japan has committed enormous resources to its semiconductor revival. TSMC's 2 Kumamoto fabs have drawn over $20 billion in combined investment, with significant Japanese government subsidies. Rapidus, Japan's domestic 2-nanometer chip initiative, has received billions in government support and is targeting pilot production at its Hokkaido facility. This is Japan building for Japan, not for export to allied manufacturing networks, for Japanese domestic champions, Japanese companies, Japanese IP. That's not a criticism. It is rational national industrial policy. Japan is trying to reclaim market share after decades of decline, but it means Japan's new fabs are oriented toward Japanese clients and Japanese industrial interests. America's need is different. America needs trusted manufacturing partners, countries that integrate into the American supply chain, not countries building proprietary capacity they control separately. The Philippines, from the moment AMD handed off its Muntinlupa facility to what became Amcor Technology in the 1980s, has been building for export, for American companies, for allied supply chains. The entire industrial model is oriented toward supplying Western technology firms. In 2024, Philippine electronic products, with semiconductors as the dominant component, totaled $39.1 billion, consistently accounting for more than half of all Philippine merchandise exports. The U.S. remains the Philippines' largest export destination. When the U.S. Commerce Secretary flies to Manila, she isn't visiting a country that wants to own the supply chain. She's visiting a country that wants to be the supply chain. That is a fundamentally different kind of partner. And yet, there's a reason that consistently shows up first when American executives are asked, off the record, why they keep going back to the Philippines over everywhere else in Asia. It's not the cost. It's not even the minerals. It's something that sounds almost embarrassingly simple, until you see what it actually costs when it's missing. Number 2. The English-speaking, American culturally aligned workforce that runs on day one. This sounds soft. It is not soft. Semiconductor assembly and packaging involves constant real-time communication. A defect flagged at an Amcor test facility in Laguna gets escalated immediately to a chip designer in San Jose. A packaging specification issue at an AT Semi plant in Cavite gets resolved on a call with a German equipment vendor. Speed of communication directly affects yield rates, defect detection, and time to market. The Philippines is the third largest English-speaking country in the world. Not English as a workable second language, English as the primary medium of professional, technical, and educational communication, embedded from primary school through engineering graduate programs. The EF English Proficiency Index 2025 ranks the Philippines as high proficiency, second in Asia. Multiple industry analyses, including Mordor Intelligence's 2025 Philippines Semiconductor Market Report, cite the country's English proficient workforce as a primary competitive differentiator for multinational semiconductor manufacturers, specifically noting it draws new projects over regional alternatives. Japan's semiconductor workforce speaks Japanese. That creates real friction for American clients, American engineers, and American managers at every stage of a supply chain being optimized aggressively for speed and cost. Not insurmountable, but present and expensive. The cultural alignment runs deeper than language. The U.S.-Philippines relationship traces back to 1898. The 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, described by U.S. Ambassador Sung Kim as America's oldest alliance in Asia, has been in continuous force for over 70 years. Filipino engineers trained by American firms in the late 1980s trained engineers who are running facilities today. Decades of institutional knowledge, built in English, oriented toward American client standards. When America needs manufacturing partners who speak the same language, technically and literally, the Philippines keeps coming back as the answer. 7 reasons in. And I want you to hold all of them in your head at once, because reason 1 isn't another advantage on the list. It's the argument that makes every other reason click into place. And once you see it, the question of why America chose the Philippines stops looking like a policy decision. It starts looking inevitable. Number 1. The Philippines is the only country that offers all 8 advantages simultaneously. Japan offers some of them. No one else offers all of them. Here's the synthesis that gets missed. Japan has extraordinary semiconductor equipment expertise. It dominates global markets for photoresists, silicon wafers, and coder/developer equipment. Japan has advanced fabrication capability. Japan is a massive investor in allied supply chains. Japan is an irreplaceable partner. But Japan has an aging workforce in terminal demographic decline. Japan has electricity costs double Korea and the US. Japan has no significant domestic critical mineral reserves. Japan's new semiconductor investments are focused on Japanese domestic champions, not allied contract manufacturing. Japan's engineering and technical workforce operates in Japanese, adding communication friction. And Japan, while strategically vital for Taiwan scenarios in a different way, does not sit at the South China Sea choke point, controlling the world's most critical maritime corridor. The Philippines checks every single box Japan cannot. Young, growing, English-speaking workforce, verified by OECD and AMRO data. Lower manufacturing cost structure, documented by AMRO and industry analysis. $1 trillion in critical minerals in the ground, confirmed by the Philippine Mines and Geosciences Bureau and Chambers and Partners. 9 USEDCA, access points, and a mutual defense treaty explicitly covering the South China Sea. Documented by U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, USNI News, and Congress.gov. A 35-year-old semiconductor manufacturing base oriented toward American supply chains, confirmed by PSA export data and ASEAN BAC analysis. Geography at the South China Sea choke point between Taiwan and global commerce, not in dispute. And a $100 billion trilateral investment corridor backed by the U.S., Japan, and partners, upheld across 2 U.S. administrations, confirmed by White House records, CNAS, and the State Department. No other country in the Indo-Pacific hits all 8 simultaneously. That is why the CHIPS Act Wine TSI partnership was signed with the Philippines. That is why Gina Raimondo flew to Manila, not Tokyo, to say we are all in. That is why the first PGI corridor in the Indo-Pacific was built around Luzon, not Honshu. That is why Amkor, ON Semiconductor, Samsung, and ASE Technology are all deepening their presence in the Philippines right now. This isn't America choosing the Philippines over Japan. Japan is a founding partner in building this. Japan is funding it. Japan is investing in it. This is America choosing the Philippines as the manufacturing hub, the place where the minerals get processed, the chips get assembled, the systems get tested, and the supply chain gets locked in beyond Chinese reach. 8 reasons, all verified. Japan's workforce is contracting. The Philippines is expanding. Japan's energy costs are double Korea and the US. The Philippines is closing the gap with fiscal reform. Japan's critical minerals are offshore and China-dependent. The Philippines holds over $1 trillion in the ground. Japan's new fabs serve Japanese industrial interests. Philippine manufacturing serves American supply chains. Japan's technical workforce communicates in Japanese. Philippine engineers communicate in English at the 3rd largest scale on Earth. Japan sits northeast of Taiwan. The Philippines sits at the South China Sea choke point. Add a trilateral commitment sustained across 2 U.S. administrations, 9 U.S. military access points, a mutual defense treaty explicitly covering the South China Sea, and 35 years of institutional semiconductor knowledge built on American client relationships. None of those advantages is small. Together, they are overwhelming. The question was, why the Philippines over Japan? The answer is, it was never a competition. Japan builds the equipment, provides the investment capital, and anchors the northern end of the first island chain. The Philippines provides the geography, the workforce, the minerals, and the volume manufacturing base. Together, inside the Allied network, they are America's answer to China's leverage over the global technology economy. And Beijing understands exactly what that means. The Philippines isn't just a labor supplier anymore. It is a critical node. The South China Sea choke point, the mineral vault, the English-speaking, American-aligned, militarily protected assembly hub that the Western technology supply chain is being built around. Which of these 8 reasons surprised you most? Drop it in the comments.